In a cold hospital hallway, a pregnant woman lies bleeding, betrayed by the man she loved, the best friend she trusted, and a cruel plan designed to erase her life completely. Within
You
just
know I'm here
hours,
for
Elena
you,
loses her
right?
husband, her fortune, and nearly her
Everything
unborn
is
child,
gonna
all
be
while her
fine.
enemies watch without mercy.
I
But
trust
what they
you.
don't know is, far away, a powerful
What is
secret is
this?
about to awaken. A father she never knew exists. And justice that no one can escape. This is a story
Wait,
of
honey,
betrayal,
it's not what
pain,
it
and
looks
the
like.
unstoppable force of karma. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come from the closest people, but even in the darkest moments, truth rises and justice finds its way. Stay strong, trust
What
wisely,
do you
and
mean
never
it's gone?
underestimate your own resilience.
No.
If this story moves
Listen
you,
to me.
don't forget
Secure
to
the
like, share,
perimeter
and support
now.
the channel.
I want
Every
everyone
click
on
gives
this
us the motivation
immediately.
to bring you more powerful stories like this. Thanks for watching.
A warm, dark pool of blood was growing on the cold floor of the hospital. Elena Carter was 8 months from giving birth when her own husband struck her across the face. The force of the blow sent her crashing to the ground. Her hands instinctively went to her stomach, a desperate shield for her baby. She pleaded for someone to help her, but not a single person moved. In the doorway, her husband's mistress simply watched with a smile on her face. Then, the woman approached, knelt beside her, and said something so wicked it will send a chill down your spine. But the most shocking part of all? Elena's best friend of 10 years was involved in the whole horrible plan. They had stripped her of everything she had. In only 15 minutes, $400,000, all the money she had saved, vanished from her bank account. In one terrible instant, Elena lost her husband, her closest friend, and her entire fortune. She was by herself, bleeding on the floor, and filled with terror that she would lose her baby. However, she was not truly alone. 200 miles away from that hospital, a phone began to ring in the lavish apartment of a billionaire. On the line was an older woman with a failing memory who had guarded a secret for 30 years. This secret was about the father Elena had no idea existed. The story that follows is one of incredible deception, but it also reveals how justice always finds its way. And justice often arrives from the most surprising sources. You will want to stay for the whole story because the final twist is something no one sees coming. Before we go on, please let me know in the comments what city you are watching from. Also, if this story moves you, please take a second to press the subscribe button. That will make sure you see all our stories in the future. Now, let us go back 48 hours to the time before Elena's life fell apart. Warm blood was pooling on the cold tile floor. Elena Carter clutched her pregnant stomach as she tried to pull herself towards the nurse's area. Her nose was broken. She could feel the broken cartilage moving beneath her skin, and the taste of her own blood filled her mouth. But that physical agony was small next to the terror that was gripping her heart. Her child, her beautiful, unborn child, was at risk. Standing behind her was Derek Mitchell, his hands still clenched into tight fists. This was the man she had adored for 4 years, the partner with whom she had created a home. This was also the person who had just struck her so hard that she flew across the room. And in the doorway, someone else was observing everything that was happening. Victoria Lawson was propped against the frame of the door, her arms folded and a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. She did not try to find a doctor. She did not call out for assistance. She just observed, like someone watching an experiment that was proceeding perfectly. The edges of Elena's sight began to darken as she tried to crawl into the hall. "Please," she managed to say through her sobs. "My baby! Someone has to save my baby!" The sharp sound of Victoria's heels echoed on the tile as she approached. The aroma of her costly perfume drifted through the air, combining with the awful smell of blood. "Oh, my dear," Victoria purred, her tone full of false concern. "This was inevitable. You were never meant to have that child, or that man, or any part of this life." Abruptly, loud alarms began to blare down the corridor. Elena heard yelling and the sound of quick footsteps on the linoleum, but it did not register. Her entire world was the piercing, cramping agony in her abdomen, and the dreadful sense that it was all slipping away. The final image she registered before blacking out was Victoria giving her a little wave. Only 48 hours before, Elena had believed her marriage was genuine. It was a Tuesday morning, and she was in her kitchen preparing pancakes for Derek, her husband. He was at the table, his attention completely focused on his phone. They lived in a lovely colonial home in a peaceful part of Columbus, Ohio. Elena had provided the down payment with her own savings from her years as a financial analyst. Derek's only contribution had been his thoughts on the color of the paint for the rooms. "Your breakfast is ready," Elena said softly, setting a warm plate down in front of him. Derek just grunted, his eyes glued to his phone. A little smile played on his lips as his fingers flew across the screen, typing out a message. Elena placed a hand on her pregnant belly. At 8 months along, she was constantly tired and felt clumsy, but she had left her job to start this new chapter. Derek said he wanted her to concentrate on their family. She agreed because she loved him and believed in the life they were supposed to be creating together. "Who are you texting?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "It is just about work," Derek mumbled, quickly hiding his phone in his pocket. "I have a big meeting today. I need to get going." He leaned in and gave her a fast kiss on the forehead. It felt more like a routine gesture than a loving one. Elena watched as he grabbed his briefcase, straightened his tie in the hall mirror, and disappeared into the garage. He never made eye contact with her, not even for a second. As silence filled the house, Elena sank into a chair and stared at the plate of pancakes Derek had left behind, completely untouched. A heavy feeling settled in her stomach. Something was terribly wrong, and she had known it for months. A cold, empty space was growing between them. It was as if she was sharing a home with a stranger who wore her husband's face. Each time she attempted to bring it up, Derek would immediately dismiss her concerns. "It is just the hormones from the pregnancy," he would tell her. "You are being too sensitive." Perhaps he had a point. Perhaps she was imagining it all. After tidying the kitchen, she prepared to go out for lunch with her friend Jessica Palmer. Jessica had been her closest companion for 10 years, since their first year of college. They had told each other every secret, and Jessica had been her rock during every crisis. Elena felt certain that Jessica could help her make sense of the situation. They arranged to meet at their beloved small cafe, the same one where they had studied together for countless hours years before. Jessica was already seated in their regular spot, offering a friendly and inviting smile. "Just look at you!" Jessica exclaimed, rising to embrace her. "You have that wonderful pregnancy glow." Elena chuckled. "I feel more like an oversized beach ball." They placed their orders and chatted about unimportant things for a bit. Their conversation covered Jessica's career in marketing, ideas for the baby's room, and updates on people they used to know. For a short time, Elena's anxieties began to disappear. Then, Jessica moved closer, her face becoming more serious. "But tell me how you are for real," she said. "You seemed upset when we talked." Elena inhaled deeply. Voicing her suspicions made them feel more true. "Last week, I discovered a receipt in Derek's jacket," she admitted in a low voice. "It was for a bouquet of flowers, but he never gave me any flowers." For just an instant, an unusual expression appeared on Jessica's face. The look vanished so fast that Elena almost missed it. "That does seem odd," Jessica replied without hesitation. "Did you bring it up with him?" "He claimed they were for a colleague's birthday," Elena shared. "But Jessica, he gets home so late all the time. He never lets his phone out of his sight. He hardly makes eye contact with me these days." Elena felt her eyes welling up with tears. "I am afraid he is seeing someone else." Jessica reached across the table and held her hand. "Oh, sweetie, you are letting your imagination run away with you. Derek adores you. He is most likely just stressed from his job." Guys get anxious when a baby's coming, Jessica added. They start to feel the pressure of all the new duties. Do you honestly believe that is all? Elena questioned, desperate to accept her friend's words. I am positive, Jessica answered with a comforting smile. The two of you have a wonderful life. Do not allow your feelings to convince you that there is a problem. Elena clung to that hope. She needed to believe she was only being insecure and that her cherished world was not about to crumble. She had no idea her closest friend had accepted $50,000 to deceive her. That afternoon, Elena drove to Sunrise Memory Care to visit her mother. Margaret Reynolds was sitting in a chair near her window, gazing without focus at the lot below. At 71 years old, her mind was losing its grip on the past, much like a picture losing its color over time. More often than not, she could not even identify the person she had raised. Hello, Mom, Elena greeted her gently, sliding a chair beside her. It is Elena. Margaret shifted her head at a slow pace. Her white hair was neatly arranged, a credit to the attentive staff. For what felt like a very long time, she simply stared at Elena with an empty expression. But in the next moment, something was different. Elena, Margaret said in a quiet voice, my lovely girl. A feeling of pure relief flowed through Elena. You know who I am today. All at once, Margaret seized Elena's arm. Her grasp was unexpectedly firm, and her gaze became focused and intense. Your father, Margaret stated, her tone urgent. There is something you must know about him. Elena was completely stunned. The identity of her birth father had always been unknown. Margaret became her mother at age 3, following the death of her biological mother in a tragic accident. The explanation she was given had always been straightforward. He was simply a man who had departed before her birth. That was the end of the story. Mom, she asked with caution, what are you telling me about my father? Margaret fought for the right words, her mind seeming to battle the fog of confusion. His name is William, she finally got out. He never knew you existed. Your birth mother did not inform him. It felt to Elena as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Who is William? What are you saying he did not know? I have his number, Margaret continued, her grip becoming firmer. I have kept it safe for all this time, just in case he was ever needed. Sarah made me promise, Margaret whispered, using the name of Elena's birth mother. Elena only knew this woman from old photographs. Mom, please, Elena begged. Who is he? Where can I find him? But the flicker of recognition in her mother's eyes was gone. A nurse came in with medication, her cheerful voice breaking the fragile moment. After the nurse left, Margaret was staring out the window again, her gaze distant. She turned to Elena and asked with confusion, Who are you? Why are you in my room? Elena drove home in a daze. Who was this man named William? And why was he a secret her mother had kept for so long? Why would her mother hide him? Elena wondered what other secrets were hidden in her mother's memory, popping up unexpectedly before disappearing again. This was the first time in her marriage that she deliberately kept something from her husband, Derek. That evening, she found herself wishing she had been more private all along. Derek called to say he had to work late, claiming an urgent matter at the office needed his full attention. When Elena kissed him goodbye, a strange sense of dread washed over her for a reason she could not explain. At 10:30 that night, she was still wide awake. She reached for Derek's iPad on the bedside table. They had always shared their passwords, priding themselves on complete honesty with their devices. Derek always said that being open with each other was the foundation of trust. The iPad screen glowed in her hands. She was about to read an article about pregnancy to distract herself when a new message appeared at the top of the screen. It was from someone named Victoria. The message said, I cannot wait for tonight. Make sure you wear that blue shirt I got for you." Elena felt her heart stop cold. Her fingers moved as if they had a mind of their own. She opened the message and scrolled back through months and months of a secret conversation. There were intimate photos, messages filled with "I love you" and plans for a life that did not include her. This woman, Victoria, called Elena cruel names like the whale and the roadblock. Derek had replied with laughing emojis and added his own sick jokes about his wife that made Elena's stomach turn. But the messages that hurt the most were from just 3 days ago. Derek had typed, "As soon as the baby is born, I am filing for divorce and for full custody. Elena will be completely blindsided." Victoria had answered, "Perfect. We can sell the house, make her pay child support, and finally begin our life. She will be left with nothing." Derek's reply was simple and vicious. "She deserves nothing." The iPad slipped out of Elena's trembling hands. She realized she had married a complete stranger. She had given up her job, her independence, and her own identity for a man who was plotting to destroy her, and she had never seen it coming. Elena did not sleep at all that night. She sat in the darkness of her bedroom with her hands on her pregnant belly. She tried to understand how her whole world had collapsed around her without a single warning. They had been married for 4 years. She spent 4 years believing Derek loved her, and 4 years building a future that was a complete lie from the start. When the sun finally rose, she had a plan. She would confront Derek, stay composed, and demand the truth. She was determined to protect herself and her unborn child. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had no idea the next 48 hours would shatter her life in ways she could never imagine. As morning light filled the room, Elena got dressed with shaking hands. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times during the long, dark night. She had pictured every way the conversation might go. Her goal was to be calm and rational. She needed to get the truth from him before she could decide on her next step. She was a 31-year-old woman, 8 months pregnant, and her life had just been exposed as a total fraud. When she got downstairs, Derek was already gone. Elena forced herself to eat a piece of toast. She knew the baby needed nourishment, even though she felt sick to her stomach. After eating, she got into her car and started the 30-minute drive to Derek's office in downtown Columbus. His office was in a sleek tower of glass and steel, the headquarters of Mitchell Real Estate Development. Derek was the regional director of sales, but Elena now knew from the text messages that his company was in serious financial trouble. It was another secret he had kept from her. She found a visitor parking spot and walked into the lobby, holding her head high. The receptionist at the front desk recognized her instantly. "Mrs. Mitchell," the young woman said with a bright smile. "Mr. Mitchell didn't let me know you were coming by." Elena replied, "I wanted it to be a surprise." The lie felt bitter in her mouth. She rode the elevator to the 14th floor, her heart hammering against her ribs with each passing level. The doors slid open to a quiet, carpeted hallway lined with office doors. She could hear the soft ringing of phones and the low murmur of salespeople on calls. Derek's office was the corner suite at the far end of the hall. His door was cracked open. Elena walked toward it silently, her shoes making no noise on the thick carpet. She heard 2 voices from inside, then she heard a woman's playful laugh. She pushed the door open the rest of the way. Derek had Victoria pressed up against his desk. His shirt was unbuttoned and her skirt was pushed high up her legs. They were so absorbed in a deep kiss that they did not see Elena standing there until she spoke. "So all of it is true," she said. They broke apart instantly. Victoria was the first to regain her composure, her shock turning into a look of amusement. She made no move to fix her clothes. She just smoothed her skirt and offered a tiny smile. "Oh, look," Victoria said. "The wife has finally connected the dots." Derek was still fumbling with his shirt buttons. His face flashed from pale white to deep red, a storm of emotions crossing his features. But when he finally met Elena's eyes, she saw no trace of regret. She saw only annoyance. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "You are supposed to be at home." Elena grabbed the doorframe for support. Her legs felt like they were about to collapse. "I am your wife. I am 8 months pregnant with your child. And you have the audacity to ask what I am doing here?" Victoria stepped away from the desk and walked straight toward Elena. She moved with the total confidence of a woman who knew she had already won. She was beautiful, but in a hard, calculating way. She had dark hair, bold red lipstick, and eyes that glinted with cold intelligence. "Let me handle this, baby," Victoria said, glancing back at Derek. She stood directly in front of Elena, so close that Elena was overwhelmed by her strong perfume. "Elena, let's be adults about this. Derek doesn't love you. He never did. You were just a convenience for him, a stable income while he figured out his life." Then she tilted her head and added, "But now you are just an obstacle." Elena looked past her, directly at Derek. "Say something," she pleaded. "Tell me she is lying." Derek straightened his tie, his expression becoming completely cold and distant. "She is not lying," he said. "I want a divorce. I have already consulted a lawyer. You will be hearing from them." Each word landed like a physical blow. Elena stumbled backward, and as she did, a sharp, piercing pain shot through her abdomen. It was a real contraction, powerful and far too soon. "I am having contractions," she gasped. Victoria just rolled her eyes. "What a drama queen! She is just faking it for sympathy." Elena clutched her stomach as another agonizing wave hit her. This was not fake. Something was terribly wrong. The stress, the shock, the utter betrayal were pushing her body into premature labor. "Derek, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have to get to a hospital." "Fine," Derek said, waving his hand dismissively. "Go to the hospital, but do not expect me to go with you. I have things to handle here." He then turned his back on her and walked back to Victoria, behaving as if his pregnant wife was not in agony in the doorway. Victoria wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his cheek. She looked at Elena over his shoulder, her eyes filled with triumph. Elena managed to stumble out of the office and down the hall to the elevator. The second the doors closed, she slid down the wall and began to sob uncontrollably. Her fingers could barely grip her phone, but she called the only person she had left. "Jessica," she managed to say when her friend answered. "I need your help. Derek is cheating on me. I am having contractions and I need to go to the hospital." "Oh my God," Jessica said, her voice filled with alarm. "I am on my way. Go straight to Mercy General." "I will meet you there. I promise. Everything is going to be okay." For a moment, Elena actually believed her. It would be the last promise that Jessica Palmer ever kept. The Mercy General Hospital building was a tall silhouette against the cloudy November sky. It was a massive facility that served most of the eastern side of Columbus. Elena somehow managed to drive herself there, gripping the steering wheel through waves of pain that came one after another. The emergency room staff saw her immediately. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. Her contractions were real, but they were not yet consistent. The baby was in danger, but for the moment was stable. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, Elena's own obstetrician, arrived in less than an hour. She was a professional and serene woman in her mid-40s, with gentle eyes and a few strands of gray hair. "Elena," she began in a soft voice, "your body is under an incredible amount of stress. These contractions are a very serious warning. I need you to stay here in the hospital so we can keep a close eye on you." "Am I going to lose my baby?" Elena whispered. "We are going to try everything in our power to make sure that does not happen," Dr. Morrison promised. But you must rest. You must remain calm. Whatever upset you today, you have to let it go and think only about your health and the health of this baby." Elena could only nod, her entire body feeling numb. She allowed the nurses to help her get comfortable in a private room. They strapped monitors to her stomach, and soon the sound of her baby's heartbeat echoed with a steady rhythm. That sound should have brought her comfort, but instead, each and every beat was a painful reminder of just how fragile her entire world had become. Jessica showed up 2 hours later. She hurried into the room, clutching a bouquet of flowers, her cheeks wet with tears. "Oh, Elena," she wept, rushing over to the bed. "I am so very sorry. I never knew about Derek. He had us all completely fooled." Elena clung to her friend, sobbing on her shoulder. "I do not know what I am going to do," Elena cried. "He is going to strip me of everything. He is going to try to take away my baby." Jessica gently ran her fingers through her hair. "We will put up a fight against him," she promised. "I will help you find a good lawyer. You do still have your savings, do you not? The account that Derek does not know about?" Elena nodded. It was her secret account, holding $400,000 that she had carefully saved before her marriage. It was at a different bank, listed under her maiden name. Derek had absolutely no idea that it even existed. It was her emergency fund, her escape plan for a nightmare exactly like this one. "Good," Jessica said. "Send me the account details so I can help you transfer it to a more secure location. Derek might attempt to freeze all of your accounts." Elena hesitated for a second. The request seemed unusual and a little too quick, but this was Jessica, her closest friend for the last 10 years. This was the same woman who held her hair for her in college, the one who helped her pick out the perfect wedding dress. In all that time, Jessica had never once given her any reason to doubt her. Elena typed the account information into a text message and handed over her phone. Jessica jotted down the details and offered a comforting smile. "Try to get some sleep," Jessica said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I will make some calls. Everything is going to be just fine." She then quietly left the room, pulling the door almost all the way closed. Elena tried her best to fall asleep. The medication the nurses had given her made her feel drowsy and tired, pulling her down into a peaceful darkness. But something felt off. A tiny alarm bell was ringing in the back of her mind that she could not identify. She carefully got out of bed to go to the restroom. The room seemed to spin a little as she walked to the small bathroom. On her way back to bed, she glanced through the narrow window in her door and saw something that made her heart stop beating. Jessica was standing in the hallway, talking to someone. It was not a nurse, and it was not a doctor. It was Victoria Lawson. They were not fighting. They did not seem surprised to see each other. They were speaking like they were old friends, like two people who were sharing a secret. They looked like partners who had planned this entire crime a long time before this moment. Victoria passed Jessica a thick envelope. Jessica opened it, quickly thumbed through the cash inside, and nodded her head in satisfaction. Then she pulled out her phone, typed for a few seconds, and held the screen up for Victoria to see. Victoria's smile was enormous, bright enough to be seen even through the tiny window. "Perfect," Elena read from her lips. "That is her account, all 400,000. Derek is going to be so pleased." Elena's legs buckled beneath her. She reached for the wall to keep from falling, barely making it back to the bed before she collapsed. Her whole body trembled with silent sobs. She pushed her fist against her mouth to keep herself from screaming out loud. Jessica, her very best friend, the sister she had chosen for herself, had been working with them this entire time. The door slowly creaked open and Jessica stepped back inside. Her face was a perfect mask of sweet concern. "You should be asleep," she said softly. Elena forced her body to stay still, to keep her breathing even and slow. to act like she did not realize the woman standing by her bed had just completely ruined her life. "I'm trying," Elena whispered. "Good." Jessica leaned over and placed a kiss on her forehead. "Sleep well, my dear friend. Everything is going exactly according to our plan." Then she was gone. With shaking fingers, Elena grabbed her phone. She opened her banking application, entered her password, and just stared at the screen. The account balance read $0.00, $400,000, transferred out just 15 minutes earlier. It was all gone. Elena now had no husband, no savings, and no best friend. She was 8 months pregnant, lying all by herself in a hospital bed. She cried into her pillow until she had no more tears to cry. After that, she just lay in the darkness, looking up at the ceiling, wondering how she could possibly survive this. She made a decision that in the morning she would check herself out of the hospital. She would find a shelter for women. She would begin a new life with absolutely nothing to her name. She had no way of knowing that the worst was still on its way. Night covered Mercy General Hospital like a heavy, dark blanket. Elena lay in her bed, watching the monitors that displayed her baby's tiny heartbeat. The contractions had started to slow down. Her doctors were feeling optimistic. If she could just remain calm and rest for several more days, she stood a very good chance of carrying her baby for the full term. But staying calm felt like an impossible task. Every single time she shut her eyes, she saw Jessica's face, the smile that was hiding 10 years of lies, the hand that had squeezed hers while it was stealing everything she owned. A nurse quietly appeared in her doorway. "Mrs. Mitchell, your husband is here. He says there's some very important insurance paperwork that you have to sign." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "I do not want to see him." The nurse looked uncomfortable. "I understand, but he is saying that if you do not sign it tonight, your insurance for the birth will be canceled. Hospital rules require a signature from a family member for this type of stay." "I do not have any other family." "I am so sorry," the nurse said in a quiet voice. "I can stand right here outside the door if you would like, but you really do need to sign these forms." Elena closed her eyes. Her mother, Margaret, was unable to sign anything. Her mind had drifted too far for any court to view her as legally competent. There was no one else. "Fine," she said, "but please stay nearby. Please stay at the nurse's station where you can hear me if I need to call you." "Of course." A couple of minutes later, Derek walked into her room. He looked very different from how he had looked at the office. He appeared softer, almost exhausted. His shoulders were slumped forward and his eyes seemed to hold a hint of regret. "Elena," he said, taking a seat in the chair beside her bed. "I am so sorry for what happened today. I was cruel. Seeing you in so much pain, it made me realize what a terrible mess I have made of everything." Elena did not reply. She just watched him like a small mouse watching a cat, waiting for the trap to be set. "Can we please talk?" Derek asked. "Just for 1 minute?" "Not in here. The nurses are always coming and going. There's a family consultation room just down the hallway. It is private. Please, just for 5 minutes." Every fiber of Elena's being screamed at her to refuse, but she had to get those insurance papers signed. She needed that coverage for the delivery, for her baby, and for whatever was going to happen next. And the room was only a short walk away. The nurse's station was right there. If anything were to happen, she could scream for help. 5 minutes, she agreed. That is all. Derek helped her out of the bed with a gentle touch that felt completely fake. They walked slowly down the corridor, Elena's hand resting protectively on her stomach. Derek stayed close by her side. To anyone else who might have been watching, they looked just like a worried husband taking care of his pregnant wife. The consultation room was at the very end of the hall, just past the last patient room and tucked around a corner. It was much more private than Elena had thought and more isolated than she had realized. Derek held the door open and gestured for her to enter. Victoria was inside, waiting for them. Elena tried to turn around and run, but Derek's hand clamped down hard on her arm. He dragged her into the room and closed the door behind them. It made a quiet click that sounded as loud as a gunshot. "Hello again, Elena," Victoria said. "I've heard that you have had a very rough day. You lost your husband, you lost all of your money, and you lost your best friend." "Let me out of this room," Elena demanded. "I will scream." Victoria simply shrugged her shoulders. "Go right ahead, but you should probably take a look at this first." She held up her phone. On the screen was a video. Elena recognized herself immediately. She recognized her own bedroom, but the man in the video was a total stranger, and the things they were doing were things she had never done before. "It is truly amazing what technology can accomplish these days," Victoria said in a casual tone. "This is our little insurance policy. If you try to fight us on the divorce, if you try to claim that Derek was unfaithful, this video will be sent to everyone, to your family, your coworkers, and the entire internet." "That is a fake," Elena said. "Anyone can tell that it is a fake." Derek moved closer to her. "It does not matter if it is fake. People will believe whatever they want to believe. And do you know what they will believe? That the baby is not mine." Elena's hand shot to her stomach to shield her child. "The baby is yours. You know that it is." "Do I?" Derek's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. "Victoria showed me things, messages you sent to other men, pictures." "Those are lies," Elena cried out. "I never sent anything to anybody. I have been faithful to you for 4 years. Derek grabbed her by her shoulders, his fingers digging deep into her skin, hard enough to leave dark bruises. "Shut your mouth," he snarled. Victoria let out a laugh. It was a high-pitched, happy sound, like a little kid watching a funny cartoon. "Hit her, Derek," Victoria urged him. "She deserves it. She has been lying to you for years." Elena struggled to get away. "Derek, please, I am pregnant." Then the punch landed. His fist connected with her jaw, and a universe of pain exploded in Elena's head. The agony shot through every nerve in her body. She heard the crack of her own nose, followed by the metallic taste of blood as it streamed down her face. The world tilted, and she felt herself falling backward. She hit the floor with a sickening thud. As her hands instinctively flew to protect her belly, Derek's foot crashed into her ribs. She cried out, a raw sound of terror. He kicked her again, and through it all, Victoria just stood there, laughing. "Not so perfect now, are you?" she sneered. Then Derek kicked her stomach. Elena felt something inside her tear apart. A sudden, terrifying gush of warmth spread beneath her. A sharp, twisting pain like a blade turning deep inside her made her gasp. A dark red stain began to blossom on her white hospital gown, growing larger and larger. It was too much blood, way too much. She screamed, a sound filled with pure panic. She screamed again and again. At last, cutting through the haze of her agony, she heard frantic shouts in the hall. The sound of running feet grew closer, followed by a series of piercing alarms. The door to her room flew open, and a team of nurses rushed in. They swarmed around her bed, calling out numbers and medical terms she couldn't comprehend. "She is hemorrhaging," one of them yelled. "The baby's heart rate is dropping. Get an operating room ready, now. Page Dr. Morrison. This is an emergency." Hands lifted Elena onto a rolling gurney. The white ceiling tiles above her blurred into streaks of light. She could hear more urgent voices, more alarms, a symphony of chaos. But as they wheeled her away, she saw Derek and Victoria walking calmly toward the hospital exit. Victoria glanced back over her shoulder. a smug little smile on her face, and gave a small wave. Then, Elena's world faded to black. The call reached William Ashford's penthouse office at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. He was reviewing contracts for his latest project, a towering skyscraper in Manhattan that would add another $100 million to his already vast fortune. At 63 years old, William had built Ashford Industries from absolutely nothing into one of the most powerful real estate empires on the East Coast. He had started out as a simple carpenter's assistant in Cleveland. Now, his name was on buildings in 12 different states. The number lighting up his phone was unfamiliar. It had an Ohio area code. For some reason, he decided to answer it. "Hello?" he said. A faint, trembling voice answered back. William, is that you? It is Margaret Reynolds." William froze, his coffee cup hovering in midair. He had not heard that name in over 30 years. Margaret Reynolds had been his old girlfriend's best friend from a time when he was just a struggling kid. Back then, he was working construction during the day and taking business classes at night, all while being head over heels for a woman named Sarah. Then, without a word, she disappeared from his life forever. "Margaret," he said, slowly lowering his cup. "What is this about? Who is Elena?" "She is your daughter, William." The voice on the phone was shaky, filled with a desperate energy. "Elena is your daughter. Sarah was pregnant when she left you. She never told you. After Sarah passed away, I raised her. William, you have to help. She is in the hospital, and she is in terrible danger." And with those words, the line went dead. William sat at his desk, completely still, feeling the thunder of his own heartbeat in his chest. His mind was a storm of impossible questions. The entire foundation of his life was cracking apart in a single moment. He had a daughter, a 31-year-old woman he never knew existed. His Sarah had not just abandoned him. She had left to protect their child, too proud to ask for help from a man who had nothing to his name. And now, that child was fighting for her life. William grabbed another phone and pressed a button. "Get my jet ready for takeoff," he told his personal assistant. "I need to be in Ohio tonight, and I want you to find out everything you can about a woman named Elena Carter. Her maiden name was Reynolds, and she's just been admitted to a hospital in Columbus." "Right away, sir," the assistant replied, followed by a brief pause. "Sir, is everything all right?" "I do not know yet," William said honestly, "but I am on my way to find out." 4 hours later, William's private jet touched down at a small airport outside of Columbus. A black sport utility vehicle was waiting for him on the tarmac. His security team had worked through the flight, digging up information. Elena Carter, age 31. She was married to a man named Derek Mitchell, a sales director at a failing real estate company. And she was currently in emergency surgery at Mercy General Hospital. The operation was the result of a violent assault. Her husband was a person of interest, and the police were already investigating. William had not slept at all. He spent the entire flight staring out the window into the deep darkness below, his mind racing. He thought of all the moments he had lost. Her first steps, her first words, birthdays and graduations, an entire life he should have been part of had passed him by, all because Sarah thought he was not good enough. He promised himself he would prove her wrong. The car pulled up to the hospital at 2 a.m. William walked past the front desk, ignoring the security guard who tried to stop him. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man used to getting his way, the same authority that dominated boardrooms and secured billion-dollar deals. A nurse stepped into his path. "Sir, I am sorry, but only immediate family can go back there." "I am her father," William said, his voice low and firm like solid rock. "Now take me to my daughter." There was something in his eyes, a power that made the nurse turn and lead the way without another word. She walked him down sterile hallways that smelled of fear and disinfectant, past rooms where other families kept their own quiet vigils, until they reached the surgical wing. Through a small glass window in a door, William saw Elena for the first time. She was lying unconscious on the operating table, her face pale and bruised. She looked so small, so broken. Doctors and nurses moved around her with quiet efficiency. Monitors beeped, tracing the lines of two different heartbeats. One was his daughter's, faint and unsteady. The other was her baby's, a tiny, rapid pulse fighting for a chance to live. William pressed his hand against the cold glass. "Come on, sweetheart," he whispered to the stranger who was his blood. "You have to fight. I just found you. You cannot leave me now." The surgery dragged on for 2 more agonizing hours. William did not move from that spot. He did not sit. He did not eat. He stood like a sentry, watching strangers fight for the life of the daughter he never knew. Then, at 4:47 in the morning, a tiny, hopeful cry broke the silence. The baby, a little boy, was alive. A surgeon looked toward the window and gave William a thumbs up. On the monitor, Elena's heart rate started to stabilize. The frantic red lines turned into a steady, reassuring green. William sagged against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. For the first time in 40 years, the self-made billionaire who had conquered the world completely broke down and wept. Elena woke up slowly, feeling as if she were floating up from the bottom of a dark sea. The first thing she felt was a deep, throbbing pain in her face and a fire in her abdomen. Every breath was an effort, but beneath the pain there was something else. A strange, hollow lightness, an emptiness. Her baby. Elena's eyes flew open. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand on her shoulder eased her back down. "Easy now," a man's calm voice said. "You have been through a terrible ordeal." She blinked, her vision slowly coming into focus. The room was softly lit by the afternoon sun peeking through the blinds. The steady beeping and humming of medical machines surrounded her bed, and sitting in a chair beside her was a man she had never seen before. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with silver hair and a kind but powerful face. There was something familiar in his eyes, like looking at a reflection of herself from a distant past. A person she had never met, but somehow recognized. "Who are you?" Elena whispered, her voice hoarse. The man leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. His expression was a storm of emotions, hope, regret, and overwhelming love. "Elena," he said softly, "my name is William Ashford. I am your father." The words hung in the air between them, feeling unreal. Elena tried to make sense of them, to fit them into the story of her life, but they simply did not belong. "I do not have a father," she managed to say. "Your mother never told me about you," William explained, his voice steady despite the emotion welling up in his eyes. "She left before I knew she was pregnant. Margaret kept her secret all these years. Margaret is the one who called me. She is the reason your life was saved." Margaret. The 30-year-old phone number. The sudden moment of clarity at the memory care center. Your father's name was William. Tears began to stream down Elena's face. Everything hurt. Her body, her heart, her very sense of who she was. For 31 years, she had felt utterly alone in the world, believing her father was just some nameless man who had abandoned her before she was even born. And now this man, this powerful stranger, was here, telling her he was the missing piece of her life she never even knew she was looking for. "I just do not understand," she sobbed. "I know," William said gently. "I know this is a lot to process. I do not think I understand it all myself yet. But we have time now. We have all the time in the world to figure it out. Together." As he spoke, the door opened and a nurse came in, carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Her face held a warm, professional smile. Mrs. Carter, are you ready to hold your son? Elena's breath caught in her throat. She was so lost in the pain and shocked by the news about her father that she had not dared to hope for the one thing that mattered most. Her baby was alive. The nurse gently placed the tiny bundle in her arms. Elena looked down at the small face, the peacefully closed eyes, and the perfect fingers curled into tiny fists. He was perfect. He was here. He was safe. Her quiet sobs turned into tears of pure, overwhelming relief. A wave of gratitude so strong washed over her that it felt like it could carry her away. William watched them, his own eyes shining with emotion. This was his family, a family he never knew he had. "Have you thought of a name for him?" he asked softly. Elena looked up at the man who had appeared from nowhere to save her. The father she had spent her whole life missing without even knowing it. "William," she said, her voice clear. "His name is William, after the wonderful grandfather he is so lucky to have." At her words, the powerful billionaire completely broke down. The man who had built an entire empire. The man who faced down corporate giants and market crashes without flinching was now weeping openly at his daughter's bedside. "I will never leave you again," he vowed. "Not either of you. I am here to stay, for good." Elena reached out and took his hand. For the first time in her life, she felt the comfort of a father's touch. In the following days, Elena started to piece together everything that happened while she was unconscious. Derek and Victoria were arrested at the hospital. Their horrible plan was captured in detail by the security cameras. Detective Frank Cooper, a veteran officer with 3 daughters of his own, took a personal interest in making sure they faced the consequences. The video evidence was undeniable. It showed Derek with his hands covered in Elena's blood, while Victoria laughed cruelly beside him. The audio even recorded Elena's terrified screams. Jessica was arrested the next morning at her apartment. The envelope of cash from Victoria was still in her possession. She tried to play the victim, claiming she was forced, but her text messages told the real story. They revealed a 6-month plot with Victoria, outlining every payment and every betrayal in cold, hard text. The bank had already frozen the $400,000 before it could be moved out of the country. William's team of financial experts had unraveled the entire scheme in just a few hours. They worked with the police to recover every single dollar. But all that legal chaos felt like it was happening in another world. Elena's universe had shrunk to the size of the tiny baby who depended on her for everything. Little Will, as the nurses called him, was born 6 weeks premature. He spent his first week in the neonatal intensive care unit, a tiny figure surrounded by monitors, tubes, and oxygen support. Elena sat by his incubator for hours every single day. She talked to him and sang softly, pouring all her hope and love into him, praying he would get stronger with each passing moment. William Sr. never left her side. He brought in top specialists to ensure little Will received the best care possible. He stayed with Elena through the long, silent hours of the night. He would bring her food she had no appetite for and gently remind her to look after herself as she cared for her son. It was in those quiet hours that they truly connected. Elena learned about her mother, Sarah Reynolds, who had been William's girlfriend for 2 years before she suddenly vanished. He told her how he had searched for Sarah. He hired private investigators and spent months trying to understand why she would leave without a trace. "I loved her so much," William said one evening, his voice heavy with a decades-old sadness. "I was planning to ask her to marry me. I would have done anything for her, but she never gave me the chance." "So why did she go?" Elena asked. "I'm not completely certain, but Margaret believes Sarah found out she was pregnant right when my first big business deal was closing. Suddenly, I was making serious money. My life was changing fast." William paused, lost in thought. "And Sarah, she was an incredibly proud woman. She never wanted anyone to think she was with me for my money. She did not want to feel like a burden. So, she just left. His voice was filled with sorrow. She disappeared, and she took my daughter with her. The words settled over Elena. She thought about her mother, who had loved her enough to raise her alone, who had sacrificed everything for her only to die in a car accident when Elena was only 3, leaving her in Margaret's care. "Margaret never told you," Elena said quietly. "She kept it a secret all those years. She never contacted me once." William nodded sadly. "She told me she almost did many times, but your mother made her promise, and Margaret always keeps her promises." Elena looked down at her own son, sleeping peacefully in his incubator. "I just wish I could have known her," she whispered. William took her hand gently. "You are so much like her," he said with a smile, his eyes misty. "You have her same spirit, her strength, and her stubborn streak. She would be so proud of the woman you've become." 2 weeks later, little Will was finally strong enough to go home. As a nurse pushed her wheelchair toward the exit, Elena held him tightly. The simple act of carrying her son out into the fresh air felt like a miracle. William was waiting by a car to take them to his home just outside Cleveland. He had insisted they stay with him in a sprawling mansion that felt more like a palace. It was grand, but it was also safe and very private. Most importantly, it was far from anyone who could ever hurt them again. "You really do not need to do all of this for us," Elena said as the car drove away from the hospital. "I know," William replied, "but I want to." She looked at him, a man who was both a stranger and her father. For the first time in a very long time, she felt a flicker of hope for the future. The estate was more beautiful than anything Elena had ever seen outside of a movie. There were acres of rolling green hills and perfectly manicured gardens. The house was a stunning mix of modern glass and classic stone, but it was not the wealth that touched her heart. It was the peace and quiet. After weeks in the hospital with its constant beeps and hushed conversations, the silence felt like the greatest luxury of all. The nursery was already set up and waiting for them. It had soft blue walls and a crib that probably cost more than Elena's old apartment. The room was filled with soft stuffed animals and gentle mobiles. A comfortable rocking chair sat by the window, perfectly placed to catch the afternoon light. "This is just too much," Elena whispered, feeling overwhelmed. "It is not nearly enough," William answered gently. "I have 31 years of being a father to catch up on." In the following weeks, Elena slowly began to heal. Her body recovered from the physical trauma first. The bruises faded away and the incisions healed, leaving few signs of Derek's terrible attack. Her emotional healing, however, was a much longer journey. She started meeting with a therapist, Dr. Catherine Price, who specialized in helping people recover from trauma. They talked about the night of the attack, about Jessica's shocking betrayal, and about the years of quiet manipulation that had led up to it. "Abuse isn't always loud," Dr. Price explained during one of their sessions. "Sometimes it's quiet. It slowly wears you down. It can even disguise itself as care or love. Then one day, you look in the mirror and you do not recognize the person looking back." "I kept thinking it was my fault," Elena admitted. "I thought if I had just been a better wife, he wouldn't have strayed. If I had just been more aware, I could have prevented it." "The only person responsible for Derek's choices is Derek," Dr. Price said firmly. "You are not responsible for his behavior. You are not responsible for his lies. None of this was your fault." Elena desperately wanted to believe her. And slowly, day by day, she started to. Little Will grew bigger and stronger with each passing day. At 6 weeks old, he started sleeping through the night. At 8 weeks old, he gave his first real smile. At 10 weeks old, He let out a laugh so pure and joyful that it brought tears to Elena's eyes every time she heard it. William Sr. transformed completely whenever he was with his grandson, the tough, serious businessman. Became a silly, loving grandfather in the nursery. He made funny faces and sang lullabies completely off-key. He would rock the baby for hours so Elena could get some much-needed rest, whispering to him all about the adventures they would have together. "I'm going to teach you how to fish," William would tell the baby, "and how to play chess, and how to throw a perfect spiral. All the things I never got to teach your mom." Elena would watch them from the doorway, her heart full. She had lost so much: her husband, her best friend, her life savings. But she had also gained something she never knew she was missing. She had found her father. She had found a family. And she had found a future. Soon she would also get her justice. The day Elena had to face Victoria Lawson in court, she wore a simple black dress. She did not wear any makeup to cover the faint traces of her bruises. It had been 6 weeks since that horrible night. Victoria was being held in jail without the possibility of bail. The judge ruled she was a flight risk, especially after they discovered she had committed fraud in other states using different identities. The evidence against her was overwhelming. There was security footage, text messages, and financial records. The fake video she created was even traced directly back to her laptop. She was facing a very, very long time behind bars. But the law was not enough for Elena. She needed to face the woman who had tried to destroy her life. William arranged a private meeting at the detention center through his lawyers. It was to be 5 minutes in a small room with guards posted right outside the door. "Are you certain you want to do this?" William asked, his voice full of concern as they drove through the gray morning light. "Yes," Elena replied, her tone firm. "I have to do this so I can finally move on." The jail was a grim concrete box surrounded by tall chain-link fences that were topped with coils of razor wire. Elena walked with her head held high through the metal detectors and past the security desks. The guards treated her with a quiet respect. They had all watched the video footage. They knew exactly what Victoria had tried to do to her. The meeting room was tiny and cold, furnished with only a metal table and 2 chairs. A security camera was mounted high on the wall, recording every single detail. Victoria was already seated when Elena entered. She looked completely different in the bright orange prison jumpsuit. She seemed so much smaller now. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone, leaving only a plain uniform and a bare face. Her eyes, however, were unchanged. They were still cold, sharp, and held not a single hint of regret. "Did you come here to gloat?" Victoria sneered. "That is so predictable of you." Elena sat down in the chair across from her. The metal table between them felt like very little protection, but she knew the guards were just outside. Victoria could no longer harm her. "I need you to understand something," Elena began, her voice steady and calm. She had practiced this speech in her mind 100 times. "You dedicated 18 months of your life to a plan to ruin me. 18 months of manipulating my husband, buying my best friend, and plotting to take my baby and my inheritance." Victoria just smirked, and I almost succeeded. Almost. Elena leaned forward slightly. "But you missed one very important thing. You were so busy thinking about the money I might inherit one day that you never thought about who I am today. I am a financial analyst. I have spent my career finding patterns of fraud in corporate accounts. Did you honestly believe I would not see the little clues? The way Jessica was suddenly wearing expensive new jewelry. The way Derek's explanations never quite made sense? I knew something was very wrong. I just never imagined how deep the deception really went." The smirk slowly disappeared from Victoria's face. "But that is not the reason I am here," Elena continued. "I am here to make you understand exactly what you have lost. It is not just your freedom. You will have a very long time to think about that. You are losing everything else." Elena paused, allowing her words to hit their mark. Derek never loved you. You must know that, don't you? He was just using you in the same way you were using him. The only real difference is that you actually believed his lies. I have read the text messages. I saw the way you looked at him. You truly thought that after I was gone, he would belong to you. But Derek does not belong to anyone but himself. Be quiet, Victoria snapped. And the money you wanted so desperately? My father is worth $4 billion. $4 billion. The $400,000 that you and Jessica managed to steal, that is just pocket change to him, and every penny of it has been recovered. Jessica is already in custody. Everything you worked for, every single one of your plans, all of your sacrifices, it was all for nothing. Victoria's calm exterior was finally starting to crumble. Her jaw was clenched, and her hands were balled into tight fists on the tabletop. And what is the worst part? Elena asked. The one thing that is going to eat you alive every day in that cell? She stood up from her chair. I am going to forget you ever existed. In a year, you will not even be a thought in my head. I will be busy raising my son in a home that is filled with love. I will be building a relationship with the father I never knew I had. I will create a life so wonderful that your 18 months of scheming will feel like nothing more than a distant, bad dream. You tried to take everything from me, but instead, you gave me everything I ever truly needed. If you had not forced Derek to show his true colors, I might have stayed in that miserable marriage for another 20 years. So, thank you, Victoria. Thank you for giving me my freedom. Elena turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, Victoria completely lost her composure. She screamed, she cursed, she pounded her fist on the metal table. She thrashed in her chair so wildly that 2 guards had to rush inside to restrain her. But Elena did not look back even once. She walked out of that jail and into the cool November air, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt free. 2 days later, it was time to face Jessica. This meeting was much more difficult to arrange. Jessica was cooperating with the police. She had provided evidence against Victoria in exchange for a lighter sentence, but she had also pleaded to see Elena to offer an explanation. William advised against it. Dr. Price felt she was not emotionally ready, but Elena knew she needed to hear what Jessica had to say with her own ears. They met in the very same room, under the same harsh fluorescent lights. Jessica looked even worse than Victoria had. Her hair was unwashed, her face was gaunt, and her eyes were puffy and red from endless crying. Elena, she began, her voice shaking. I am so sorry. I never wanted any of this to happen. Yes, you did. Elena's voice was like ice. You wanted every single moment of it. Do not insult me intelligence by pretending that you did not. At that, Jessica collapsed into sobs. I was jealous of you. I have always been so jealous. You had the amazing career, the perfect husband, the baby on the way. You think my life was perfect? A hot, sharp anger flared up inside Elena. Do you think anything about my life was easy? I gave up my career for a man who was cheating on me. I was isolated, controlled, and made to feel like I was worthless. And you, my supposed best friend, you watched it happen and then you decided to help them destroy me. Victoria paid me $150,000, Jessica whispered. I have student loans and credit card debt. I was drowning. Do not you dare make this about money. You had so many chances to tell me the truth. Every single time we had lunch, every phone call, you looked me in the eyes and you chose to lie. You chose to betray me, and you enjoyed every second of it. Jessica had no reply. Tears just streamed down her face, but Elena felt absolutely no sympathy for her. I truly hope the money was worth it, Jessica. Because you did not just lose a friend. You lost everything, and you will have many years in a prison cell to think about that." Elena turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance. The sound of Jessica's desperate sobs followed her down the corridor, but Elena did not feel a single drop of guilt. She only felt relief. The trial started 3 months later. By then, little Will was 4 months old and getting bigger and stronger each day. He had his father's dark hair, but he had his mother's eyes. And every time Elena held him, he would give her a huge, happy smile. She no longer thought of him as Derek's son. He was her son. He belonged to her and to William Sr. They were the family they had built together out of the ashes of betrayal. On the day the sentences were handed down, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery, and victims' advocates sat in the front row. Detective Cooper, who had been with the case from the very beginning, watched from the back of the room with a look of quiet pride. Derek Mitchell was a hollowed-out version of the man Elena had married. Life behind bars had not been kind to him. His gambling debts had followed him inside. The constant fear of other inmates had left him looking thin and defeated. His charming smile was gone. His powerful confidence had vanished. Everything that had once made him seem so attractive had been stripped away. The court clerk read the charges one after another: aggravated assault on a pregnant woman, attempted murder due to the severity of Elena's injuries, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit grand theft. With every charge that was read, Elena felt a tremendous weight lift from her. Then it was her time to speak. She walked to the podium and looked straight at the judge. Her hands were steady, and her voice was strong. "Your Honor," she began, "the man sitting over there was supposed to be my partner for life. He was supposed to keep me safe. He was supposed to be the father of my child. Instead, he brutally attacked me when I was 8 months pregnant. He kicked me in the stomach, trying to kill our unborn son. He laughed while his mistress stood by and cheered him on." She paused for a moment, letting her words fill the silent courtroom. "I am not standing here today asking for revenge. I am asking for justice. I ask that Derek Mitchell never gets the opportunity to do this to another woman. I ask that my son can grow up in a world where men like Derek are held responsible for what they do. And I ask that when Derek is sitting in his prison cell for the next 2 decades, he remembers. I want him to remember that he had a family. He had a wife that loved him. He had a son that would have looked up to him. And he threw it all away for a woman who was only using him for his money." She returned to her seat beside William. The verdicts were delivered quickly, guilty on all charges. The sentences finally brought a feeling of peace. Derek Mitchell was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. He would not be eligible for parole for at least 18 of those years. Victoria Lawson received 18 years for conspiracy, fraud, and for being an accessory to attempted murder. For her role in the theft and conspiracy, Jessica Palmer was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As guards led Derek away in handcuffs, he searched for Elena's face one last time. He cried out, "Elena, please, I am so sorry." She offered him no response at all. She simply turned toward her father, who wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders. "It is finally over," William said. "Yes," Elena replied softly. "It is." 6 months after the trial, Margaret Reynolds' health began to fail quickly. Elena had made a point to visit her every week after leaving the hospital. Some days, Margaret recognized her. On other days, she did not. But even on the hard days, Elena would sit beside her bed, gently holding her hand. She would share stories about all of little Will's newest adventures. "He is crawling everywhere now," Elena said during one visit. "He gets into everything. Your house would have been a complete mess." A faint smile touched Margaret's lips. She did not completely understand, but the soothing sound of Elena's voice brought her a sense of peace. But the dementia was a cruel and relentless disease. With each passing month, it stole another piece of Margaret. On a Thursday morning, the staff at Sunrise Memory Care called Elena. They gently told her that the end was likely very near. She and William drove to the facility, together under a heavy gray sky that promised snow. Little Will was safe at home with the nanny William had found for them. He was warm and happy, completely unaware of the sorrow that was about to unfold. The air in Margaret's room was still and quiet. The constant beeping of the monitors had been silenced, and all medical interventions had ceased. There was nothing left for anyone to do but to wait. Elena sat on one side of the bed while William sat on the other. They each took one of Margaret's hands, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Each exhale seemed gentler than the one before it. "Thank you," William whispered in a quiet voice, "for everything, for raising my daughter when I could not, for holding onto my phone number all of those years, for finally making that call." Margaret's eyes slowly fluttered open. For one brief, stunning moment, her gaze was perfectly clear. "William," she breathed. "You came?" "I came," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "All because of you." Margaret's gaze shifted to find Elena. "My sweet girl, I am so sorry I kept secrets from you." Elena leaned closer, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life, Mom. You were always there to protect me. There is nothing to forgive." Margaret looked between them, father and daughter, finally together in the same room after 31 years. "Family," she whispered. "Finally." Her eyes drifted closed, and this time they remained that way. Elena wept. William wept. They held hands across Margaret's still body. They were two strangers, finally united by the woman who had loved them both so deeply. The funeral was a small and private gathering. Elena had not known many of Margaret's friends. The dementia had slowly isolated her from the world during her last years. It had cut her off from the community in which she was once so involved. But the people who came to pay their respects spoke with incredible warmth about the woman they remembered. She had been a dedicated kindergarten teacher for 30 years. She volunteered at the local food bank every single Thanksgiving. She was a loving guardian who took in a 3-year-old girl and raised her as if she were her own child. Little Will was there, nestled securely in Elena's arms. He was far too young to understand what was happening, but his presence was important. He was a part of Margaret's legacy, just as Elena was. He represented the next generation of the family that Margaret had fought with all her might to keep safe. William stood to deliver the eulogy. "Margaret Reynolds was not a famous person," he started. "She did not build enormous companies or change the world in ways that make the newspapers. But what she did was much more important. She kept a promise for 30 years. She protected a secret that was not hers to keep, all because she had given her word to a friend. And when the time was right, she found the courage to break that promise." He paused for a moment, his voice heavy with feeling. "She broke it because keeping it would have meant watching her own daughter die. I was never able to thank her properly. I never got the chance to tell her what her phone call truly meant to me. But I can honor her memory now by being the father Elena deserves, by being the grandfather that little Will needs, by holding this family together that Margaret worked so tirelessly to build." After the service, Elena stood alone by Margaret's grave. The headstone was simple: Margaret Ann Reynolds, beloved mother and guardian. She kept families together. "Thank you, Mom," Elena whispered, "for everything. For keeping his number, for making that call, for giving me a family when I had nobody." She placed a bouquet of flowers on the fresh earth and stood there in the silence as delicate snowflakes began to fall. An hour later, William came to find her. She was shivering from the cold but seemed unwilling to leave. "She is at peace now," he said gently. "I know." Elena wiped a fresh tear from her eye. "I just miss her so much." You always will, William said, putting an arm around her. That is what love does. It stays with us, long after the people we love are gone. They walked back toward the car together, leaving Margaret to her final rest. In the months that followed, Elena began to build a new life for herself. She moved out of William's sprawling estate and bought her own home. It was a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, the perfect place for little Will to grow up feeling safe and loved. At first, William protested. He wanted her close by. He was desperate to make up for all the years he had lost. He wanted to be present for every single milestone. But Elena needed her independence. She had to prove to herself that she could stand on her own 2 feet before she could truly accept his help. I am not leaving you, she assured him. I will bring little Will over for a visit every single weekend. And you can come over anytime you want, but I need to do this for myself. I need to know I am strong enough. William understood perfectly. He had built his own business from nothing. He knew exactly how important that sense of self-reliance was. Elena returned to work, but not to her old career. She took a position as a consultant for a nonprofit organization. She helped survivors of domestic abuse with their financial planning. The work gave her a deep sense of purpose that her old job never could. She showed women what their options were. She helped them hide money from their abusive partners. She helped them create safe exit plans. Each woman she was able to help felt like a personal triumph. Little Will celebrated his first birthday on a warm and sunny afternoon in May. William's huge backyard was decorated with balloons and bright, colorful streamers. Elena invited her co-workers from the nonprofit, her new neighbors, and a few of the survivors she had helped, who had now become dear friends. She stood in the garden, watching her son take wobbly steps across the grass. He was chasing after bubbles that another child was blowing. He tripped and fell, but he immediately pushed himself back up and kept going. You could see the sheer determination in his unsteady walk. He is going to be an amazing person, William said as he came to stand next to her. He already is. William handed her a glass of champagne. To family, Elena said, gently clinking her glass against his. To family. They watched little Will together, a grandfather and a mother, bound by the child who represented everything they had almost lost. Do you ever feel sad that you did not know me sooner? Elena asked. William considered the question for a moment. Every single day, he admitted. I think about all the moments I missed. Your first steps, your high school graduation, your wedding. Even though I now know that marriage was a terrible mistake, I can never have those years back, and that loss will always hurt. He paused. But I do not believe in wasting even one moment on what might have been. I found you when you needed me the most. Now every day I have with you, and this little boy is a precious gift I never believed I would receive. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. My entire life, I felt like I never truly belonged anywhere, she confessed. It was like I was waiting for something, but I never knew what it was. And now I know. I was waiting for you. You belong right here, William answered. Both you and little Will. This is your home. Forever. The sun began its slow journey down, painting the evening sky in shades of gold and pink. Little Will came running toward them with his arms outstretched, his laughter a sound of pure joy. Elena scooped him up and lifted him high into the air. Happy birthday, my perfect boy, she whispered into his soft hair. For the first time in her life, everything felt completely and perfectly right. That feeling was a lifetime away from the ordinary Tuesday morning when a notification appeared on her phone. She was in her kitchen making breakfast, scrambling eggs, while little Will happily banged a wooden spoon against his high chair tray. Sunlight streamed in through the windows. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room. Everything was absolutely normal. Everything was peaceful. Then her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She glanced at the screen, assuming it was a text from William, or perhaps a reminder about her doctor's appointment that afternoon. Instead, she saw a news alert. Derek Mitchell found dead in prison cell, apparent suicide. Elena stood frozen, the spatula still in her hand. She read the headline again and again, but the words remained the same. Derek was dead, the man who had struck her, the man who had kicked her pregnant belly, the man who had tried to ruin her life and her child's life. He was dead. Elena stood perfectly still, waiting for some kind of feeling to wash over her. Perhaps relief, or maybe satisfaction. She would have even accepted grief for the man she had once adored. She waited for anything, but all she felt was a deep quiet inside her, a simple knowledge that a very dark part of her life was officially, finally over. She turned off the stove, lifted little Will from his high chair, and called her father. "I just saw the news," William said as soon as he picked up. "Are you all right?" "I think I am," Elena replied. "I thought I would feel something, relief, anger, anything, but I do not." "That is okay. You do not have to feel anything at all. He spent his entire life trying to be important," Elena said, the words coming out slowly. "He was always trying to be the most powerful person in the room, trying to manage everyone and everything. And now," she continued, "his whole existence has been boiled down to a single notification on my phone, a notification that I am about to erase." She looked down at the screen. "Is that a bad thing?" she asked. "To feel nothing?" "No." William's voice was filled with kindness. "It means he does not have any control over you anymore. It means you are finally free." Elena deleted the notification. Then she went back to the kitchen to finish making breakfast. She fed little Will his scrambled eggs and toast. She washed the dishes, put in a load of laundry, and simply went on with her day as if nothing had happened. Because in her world, nothing really had changed. Derek Mitchell had already vanished from her life. He was gone from the very first moment he had raised his hand to her. The official news of his death was just a final, small detail. That evening, long after little Will was fast asleep, Elena poured herself a glass of wine. She sat on her back porch, watching the stars pop out one by one in the night sky. She thought about the woman she used to be just 2 years ago, the woman who had given up her career for a man who had never really loved her, the woman who told her best friend her deepest secrets only to be completely betrayed, the woman who thought that love meant she had to give away pieces of herself. She had believed marriage required her to be quiet and agreeable. She thought that just being a kind person would be enough to bring her happiness. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone much stronger, someone who had survived something that felt impossible to overcome, someone who had built a brand new life from the ashes of betrayal and had emerged more powerful than she had ever imagined. Elena lifted her glass to the quiet, dark sky. "To the woman I was," she whispered, "and to the woman I have become." She took a slow sip, feeling the warmth of the wine spread through her chest. Tomorrow she would visit Margaret's grave. She would tell her mother all about what happened to Derek. Even though she knew Margaret could not hear her, she would still bring fresh flowers and talk to her quietly for an hour, just like she did every single week. The day after that, she would take little Will to see his grandfather. They would have lunch together in the garden. William would make funny faces to get the baby to laugh. Elena would roll her eyes and act like she was annoyed, but inside her heart would feel so full of love it might burst. And the day after that, she would go back to work. She would help another woman find the courage to leave an abusive home. She would use her own experience to help lead someone else toward their own freedom. She would turn her own pain into a purpose, and her life would continue. It would not be perfect, and it would not be without its difficulties, but it would always be moving forward. always. Elena finished her glass of wine and went back inside the house. She looked in on little Will, gently smoothing the hair on his forehead, still in awe of the simple miracle that he was here. "Good night, my perfect boy," she whispered. "Mommy loves you more than words can say." She went to her own room, climbed into bed, and fell asleep almost immediately. There were no bad dreams, no waking up in a cold sweat. There was only calm, peaceful sleep and the quiet knowledge that she was right where she was meant to be. The morning of little Will's second birthday was bright and beautiful. Elena woke up early, even before her alarm, feeling a burst of energy that surprised her. 2 years. It had been 2 years since the worst day of her life. 2 years since the attack that nearly destroyed her and her son. 2 years since she found out the terrible truth about Derek, Victoria, and Jessica. 2 full years of healing. She took a shower, got dressed, and started making breakfast while little Will was still sleeping. The house was peaceful, filled only with the sound of birds chirping outside and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. This quiet calm was her new way of life. Feeling safe was something she'd come to expect. The constant knot of fear that she had lived with throughout her marriage had slowly unraveled and disappeared. It was replaced by a sense of peace she never thought was possible. When little Will woke up, she brought him downstairs and set him in his high chair. "Happy birthday, my sweet boy," she said, kissing the top of his head. "You are 2 years old today." He flashed her a huge smile, showing off his tiny baby teeth. "2," he announced proudly. He had started talking a few months earlier, using simple words and little phrases that amazed Elena every single time. The party was scheduled for that afternoon at William's big house. Elena had invited the same small group of friends as the year before. Her co-workers were coming, along with her neighbors, and the friends she had made in her survivors support group. This was the family she had carefully built for herself after losing everything. But before they went to the celebration, there was one important stop she needed to make. She buckled little Will securely into his car seat and drove to the cemetery. Margaret's grave was tidy and well tended. Elena paid for a service to keep the grass trimmed and the flowers looking fresh. It was the least she could do for the mother who had given her so much. She lifted Will out of the car and walked with him to the headstone. "Hello, Mom," Elena whispered. "There is someone I want you to meet." In her arms, little Will squirmed, his eyes following a butterfly dancing in the air. "He turned 2 today," she continued softly. 2 whole years. He is already walking and talking and causing trouble everywhere. You would adore him. She settled onto the soft grass beside the headstone, placing Will on her lap. "Derek is gone," she stated simply. "I have a feeling you know that already, and I feel nothing. It is strange, is it not? You taught me to embrace my emotions, never to hide them. But when they told me he died, there was just nothing. No sadness, no anger, not even relief, just a void." Her gaze followed the butterfly as it fluttered from one flower to another. "William is amazing," she said. "He spoils little Will rotten, but I cannot bring myself to tell him to stop. He lost so much time. I believe he is trying to reclaim all those lost years in a single moment." Little Will plucked a fistful of green grass and presented it to his mother with a proud look. "Oh, thank you, sweetie," Elena chuckled. "It is lovely." She looked back at the stone carving. "I am okay, Mom. I am truly okay. After all that I went through, I never imagined I would say those words and mean them. I honestly believed I was shattered for good. But I am not. I am stronger now than I have ever been, and I have you to thank for that." She got to her feet, brushing the grass from her clothes. "I love you, Mom. I will love you always. Thank you for saving my life." She carried Will back to the car and began the drive to William's estate. The party was exactly what her heart needed. William had gone completely over the top with decorations. There were colorful balloons everywhere, a giant bounce house on the lawn, and even a small petting zoo with little ponies and baby goats, which made Will squeal with pure joy. "You are spoiling him," Elena said with a smile as William handed her a glass of champagne. "That is what grandfathers are for," William replied, not looking the least bit sorry. She watched her son happily chase a tiny goat across the lawn, his laughter floating through the air like a perfect melody. "I never thought I would have this," she said quietly. "A family, a real one. Growing up, it was always just me and Margaret. I thought that was all I was ever going to have. And then with Derek, I thought I had finally found my forever person, my partner. But the whole thing was a lie." She turned to William. "And then you just appeared out of thin air, this father I never knew I had, and suddenly I had more family than I ever dreamed of." Tears welled up in William's eyes. "I wish I had known about this sooner. I wish your mother had told me everything. I know she should have. But maybe this is just the way things were supposed to unfold. Perhaps I had to endure all of that to grow into the person I am today, so I could truly cherish what I have now. Or maybe," William offered in a soft voice, "terrible things just happen to wonderful people sometimes, and there's no profound lesson to be found in it. There's only the struggle to survive, and you, my dear, survived." Elena considered his words for a quiet moment. "I think I prefer your way of looking at it," she confessed. "It takes away the pressure of trying to find some meaning in all that pain. You do not need to find any meaning. All you have to do is keep going." Little Will came dashing toward them, his face covered in frosting from a cupcake he had gotten from someone. "Mama!" he yelled. "Pop, Pop, look at this!" He presented a small handful of dandelions. They were already limp and crumpled, but he held them out with immense pride. Elena knelt down and took the flowers with a look of pure joy. "Oh, they are gorgeous," she declared. "They are the most wonderful flowers I have ever laid eyes on." A huge smile spread across little Will's face. William then lifted the boy high into his arms, spinning him around and around until they were both delightfully dizzy. Elena just watched them, her heart feeling so full of love it almost hurt. This was the family that she'd created for herself. It was imperfect and unexpected, and it was more precious than anything she could have possibly imagined. This was the life she was living now, and it was a very good life. 3 years had gone by since the day of the attack. Elena was standing at a podium, gazing out at a conference hall packed with people. The audience included advocates for victims of domestic violence, law enforcement officers, and other survivors. She was the keynote speaker at the annual summit for those who'd survived partner violence. It was an honor she had never anticipated, a platform she never imagined she would ever command. "Thank you all for having me here," she began. Her voice was steady and confident. "I am standing here today to tell you my story. It is not because my story is unique, but because it is incredibly common. Every single one of you in this room knows someone who has gone through something similar. Silence allows abuse to thrive, and I have decided I will not be silent for one more day." She shared her entire journey with them. She explained how her independence was gradually taken from her throughout her marriage. She spoke about the psychological games that made her doubt her own mind. She talked about the affair she had always sensed was happening, but was too afraid to confront. She told them about the betrayal by her closest friend, and she detailed the assault that nearly took her life and the life of her child. She also told them about the father who seemed to appear from nowhere to rescue her. "People often believe that surviving abuse is a matter of physical strength," she continued, "but it is not. It is about refusing to accept the narrative your abuser forces on you. It is about holding on to the person you were before they tried to shatter you. It is about building a brand new life after everything you once held dear has been taken away. She paused for a breath, looking at the faces staring back at her. I was one of the lucky ones. I received help that so many survivors never get. I had a wealthy father who showed up at just the right moment. I was able to see doctors, hire lawyers, and speak with therapists. Not everyone has those opportunities. That is precisely why the work that all of you do is so unbelievably important. That is why organizations like this one matter so much. She gripped the sides of the podium. But there is something I really need you to understand. Even with all of that support, I had to do the hardest work by myself. I was still the one who had to look in the mirror every single morning and choose to believe that I was worth saving. I was still the one who had to silence the voice in my own head that whispered the abuse was my fault. I was still the one who had to rebuild my entire identity from the ground up. The entire room was silent, hanging on every single word she spoke. That is the true fight for survival, Elena explained. It is not just about leaving the person who hurts you. It is not just about finding a safe place to live. It is about reclaiming the person you were always destined to become. And that is a task that nobody else can complete for you. You have to be the one to do it. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one single act of courage at a time. She stepped away from the podium. I am living proof that this can be done, and so is every other survivor who is in this room with us today. Thank you. The applause that followed was deafening. After her speech, a young woman approached Elena in the lobby. She appeared to be around 25 years old. She had dark shadows under her eyes and a slumped posture, as if she were trying to make herself invisible. Mrs. Ashford, she began timidly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. I am not sure which name to use. Elena offered her a warm, reassuring smile. Elena is perfectly fine. The young woman swallowed hard, her anxiety obvious. I just had to say, your speech, it meant so much to me. I am in a situation, a really bad one, and I have no idea how to get out. Elena immediately recognized the fear in her eyes. She recognized the shame, and she saw the faint flicker of hope that someone, anyone, might finally understand. What is your name? Elena asked softly. Sarah. Hearing the name was like a blow to the stomach for Elena. It was her own mother's name, the woman who had chosen to disappear rather than reach out for help. Sarah, Elena said, her voice now firm and clear. You are going to get out, and I am going to help you, but the very first thing you have to believe is this. Whatever is happening to you is not your fault. Do you hear me? It is not your fault. Tears started to form in Sarah's eyes. I just always think if I was only a better person, if I just tried a little harder. No, Elena insisted, taking the young woman's hands in her own. That is exactly what he wants you to think. That is how this kind of cruelty works. It tricks you into believing that you are the one with the problem. But the problem is him. The problem has always been him. And you deserve a life that is so much better than this. They sat together and talked for a full hour. Elena gave Sarah her personal cell phone number. She gave her the location of a women's shelter. She promised that she would call to check on her. She promised that she would be there for her, and she kept every single one of those promises. 6 months later, Sarah was living a new life. With Elena's encouragement, she had found the courage to leave. She was living in a safe house and saving money for her own place. She was seeing a counselor. She was carefully putting her life back together, one piece at a time. You saved my life, Sarah said to Elena as they sat together sharing coffee one afternoon. No, Elena replied gently. You saved your own life. All I did was show you where the door was. Sarah just shook her head in disagreement. I never would have been able to do it if it was not for you. Yes, you would have. It might have taken you longer. It might have been even harder, but you have a deep well of strength inside of you that you've not even begun to recognize yet. And one day, you will use that very strength to help someone else. That is the way this is supposed to work. That is how we finally break the cycle." Sarah was crying again, but these were gentle tears of overwhelming gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing in me when I could not even believe in myself." Elena wrapped her in a long, comforting hug. "You are going to be okay," she said. "You are going to be more than okay. You are going to be amazing." And Elena was certain it was true, because she had been through it all herself. 5 years after the most terrifying day of her life, Elena Carter was standing in her own backyard. She was watching her son as he played. Little Will was not so little these days. At 5 years old, he was tall for his age. He had his mother's eyes and a joyful laugh that was just like his grandfather's. He was sprinting across the lawn, trying to catch butterflies. His sneakers made soft, squishy noises in the dewy morning grass. "Mama!" he yelled. "You have to come see this!" Elena set her coffee cup down and walked over to where he was standing. "What have you discovered, my love?" He pointed at a caterpillar inching its way up the stem of a flower. "He is so fuzzy. Can I take him inside?" "No, sweetheart. Caterpillars need to be outside so they can grow up to become butterflies." "But what if he does not want to be a butterfly? What if he likes being a caterpillar and wants to stay one forever?" Elena knelt down to his level. She considered his question with the genuine seriousness it deserved. "Well," she said after a moment, "I suppose that becoming a butterfly is just what caterpillars are born to do. It is not always an easy process. They have to go into a cocoon and completely change who they are. I imagine it must feel very scary, but when they finally emerge, they have wings and they can fly." Little Will nodded, thinking about it very carefully. "Is it like when you changed? Pop said you had to go through something really difficult to become the person you are today." Elena felt her breath catch in her chest. William had shared a version of her story with him, a simple one for a child to understand, but one that was true in its own way. "Yes," she said in a quiet voice, "it was just like when I changed. Are you glad that you became a butterfly?" She looked at her son. She looked at his sweet, sincere face and his wide, curious eyes. She looked at this beautiful, miraculous boy who had cost her almost everything, but in return had given her the whole world. "Yes," she replied, "I am very, very glad." He gave her a big smile and turned his attention back to the caterpillar. "I think he wants to sit on this flower for a while. Then we will let him sit right there." They watched the tiny creature in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Elena's phone made a buzzing sound. It was a message from William. "I am on my way. I will see you in 20 minutes. Pop is on his way," she told little Will. "We should probably go get ready." "Is he going to bring me presents?" Elena laughed softly. "He always brings you presents." They headed into the house to get cleaned up. Elena helped little Will wash his hands and change into a clean pair of sneakers. As they walked down the hall, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the mirror. She thought of the woman she was 5 years before, a person she could barely recognize now. The physical marks were long gone. The emotional wounds had healed into scars. They were still there, but they were now just one chapter of her life, not the entire book. She had built an existence she once thought was a fantasy. She had a career dedicated to helping others, a home full of laughter and light, and a family that spanned 3 generations. At 36 years old, she ran a nonprofit that had already rescued over 200 women from violent homes. She was a mom, a daughter, a person who had endured. She was content. Just then the doorbell chimed. Little Will dashed to answer it. He swung the door open, revealing William on the doorstep. His arms were overflowing with gifts wrapped in colorful paper. Pop, the little boy shouted, jumping straight into his grandfather's embrace. William caught him effortlessly as if he had done so thousands of times before and hoisted him high into the air. "Hey there, my number 1 guy. Are you prepared for presents?" "Always." They all went into the living room, where Will tore into the gifts with glee. William had come bearing toys, stories, and a shiny new bicycle that was still in its box. "You indulge him too much," Elena commented. It was the same line she delivered with every visit. "It is a grandfather's job," William replied. It was his standard answer. She chuckled, choosing not to press the point. Certain battles were simply not necessary. A while later, with little Will absorbed by his new treasures, Elena and William relaxed on the back porch with glasses of wine. "Do you recall something you said to me on my first day in the hospital?" Elena began. "I said quite a bit that day. What part are you remembering?" "You promised you would never abandon me. You promised you were back for good." William nodded slowly. "I do remember." "I did not trust you," Elena admitted quietly. "I figured you were only telling me what I wanted to hear at that moment. So many people had walked away from me before. My own mother, despite her difficult circumstances, then Derek and Jessica. I had stopped believing that anyone would ever actually stick around. But I stuck around." "Yes," she agreed. "You did." William reached across the small table and took her hand in his. "I'm aware that I cannot reclaim 31 lost years. I know how much I was absent for. But I want you to understand, these past 5 years have been the best years of my life. Having the chance to be your dad and his grandpa. It filled a hole in my heart I did not even know was there." Elena gently squeezed his hand. "I once had a very different idea of what family was. I believed it was about a wedding ring and a common history. I thought it was an obligation, but it is not about that in the slightest, is it?" "Not at all," William confirmed. "Family is defined by the people who are there for you. It is the people who do not leave. It is the people who pick you even when they have no obligation to." They sat in a peaceful silence, observing the sun dip toward the horizon. "I carried so much rage for so long," Elena said into the quiet, "at Derek, Victoria, and Jessica. I was mad at the entire universe for allowing it, but that anger is gone now. Instead, I feel gratitude. Does that seem strange?" "It is not strange in the least," William said gently. "Anger consumes a great deal of fuel. Your energy is needed for far better things these days." Just then, little Will ran out onto the porch, clutching a new toy truck in his small hands. "Mama, look, it has lights!" he exclaimed. He pressed a tiny button, and the truck's headlights blinked. A warm smile spread across Elena's face. "That is incredible, honey," she said. Then, with genuine enthusiasm, she told him, "Go show it to Pop Pop." The boy gladly scrambled onto William's lap. He started to demonstrate every single function of his new toy. He described all its parts with the solemn authority that only a 5-year-old can possess. Elena watched them together, her father with her son. They were grandfather and grandson, bound by genetics and affection. It felt like a true miracle that they had found their way to one another through so much pain. This was her real family. It was not the one she was given at birth, nor the one she had worked so desperately to create with Derek. This was a different kind of family, and it was far more resilient. It was a family born from the ashes of deceit and heartbreak, bound by the deliberate decision to love. The setting sun painted the clouds with stunning hues of gold and rose. Little Will's careful descriptions faded into quiet, sleepy murmurs. William cradled the boy in his arms. He looked at Elena over Will's head and whispered, "Thank you." "What for?" she asked. He answered, "For allowing me into this life, for offering me another opportunity that I did not earn." Elena met his gaze and replied, "You were always worthy of it. You just had not realized it yet." She rose to her feet and gently took little Will from William's arms. "Time for bed for this one," she said quietly. William also got up. "I ought to be on my way as well. My first meeting is early in the morning." They made their way to the front door. Elena adjusted her sleeping son onto one hip, freeing an arm to embrace her father. "Next week, same time?" she asked, smiling. "I would never miss it," he vowed. He placed a kiss on her forehead and then another on Will's and went to his car. Elena watched until his car disappeared down the road, then brought her son upstairs. She settled him into his bed and drew the soft blanket up over him. His eyes were already closed, his tiny eyelids trembling on the verge of sleep. Elena leaned down and whispered, "I love you." From the depths of his drowsiness, he mumbled, "Love you too, Mama." She switched off his light and paused in the doorway for a moment. She could hear his breathing even out into the slow, deep rhythm of sleep. Then she returned to the ground floor. The house was still and silent. The plates from supper sat by the sink. Toys were strewn across the living room carpet. She was aware that the morning would bring her job, appointments, and the normal chaos of her life. But right now, in this moment, all she felt was peace. Elena went to the kitchen for a final glass of wine. With her glass in hand, she stepped onto the back porch. The first stars were beginning to show against the deepening blue of the sky. Her mind drifted to Margaret, resting peacefully now in the town cemetery. She thought of her birth mother, Sarah, whose love was so strong she had disappeared just to give Elena a better future. She remembered William, a man who conquered the business world but only discovered real happiness when he found the daughter he never knew he had. And then her thoughts settled on Derek. He chose to end his own life in a cold prison cell, finally consumed by the demons he always refused to confront. She also considered Victoria, who was still behind bars and had nothing left of what she'd schemed to gain. She pictured Jessica, who had been free for 2 years and was now making a simple life as a receptionist somewhere in Florida. Her world was forever smaller because of decisions that could not be changed. Finally, she focused on herself. She was Elena Carter. She was a survivor, a mother, a champion for others, and a daughter. She felt like a butterfly that had at last broken free of its cocoon. She raised her glass to the night. "To all the people who helped me rise," she whispered, "and to all the people who tried to pull me down. You all helped make me who I am today." She took a slow sip of her wine. It tasted rich and full of promise. The evening air was crisp and still. Inside her home, her son slept soundly and securely. Across the city, her father drove towards his own house, his heart filled with joy. And all over the country, women she had aided were beginning their lives anew. They were discovering their own power and learning to soar. When her glass was empty, Elena went inside. She cleaned the dishes from the sink. She gathered the toys from the living room. She secured the locks and switched off the lamps. Finally, she walked upstairs to her room and slid into her bed. Sleep came to her within moments. There were no bad dreams, no startling awake in a panic. There was only deep, untroubled slumber. She was, at last, truly home.